Here we are on the last lesson of the circulatory system. Today we're talking about two special circulatory pathways, fetal circulation and lymphatic circulation. The goals for the fetal circulation are to be able to describe the pathways of blood take inside a developing fetus and some of the specialized structures that are present in fetal development. She'll also be able to describe the structure and function of the placenta, as well as changes that occur to fetal circulation as birth occurs and shortly after birth in the newborn. An overview of fetal development. First, the fetus develops its heart around 3 to 4 weeks gestation. So that's 3 to 4 weeks after fertilization occurs, the heart is beginning to beat. By 8 weeks, all organ systems, including the heart, are fully functioning. And between 8 and 12 weeks, the heartbeat can be detected using a Doppler. By 16 weeks, the fetal heartbeat is loud enough that it can be heard outside the mother's body with a stethoscope. The fetus, of course, does not use lungs for gas exchange, and it relies on maternal circulation to supply oxygen and nutrients and to remove wastes. And there are specialized structures, like a placenta and umbilical cord, and modifications to the fetus's heart that allow for circulatory functions to take place in utero. You can see here that by day 22, the heart has begun to beat with the child's own blood, and that may be a different blood type than the mother's. By 12 weeks, the baby looks almost like a real baby, and all of the parts are functioning. From here on out, it's mostly about developing and maturing, getting ready to make the transition outside of the womb. If you haven't seen one of these before, pregnant ladies often compare the size of their baby to fruits and vegetables. So here's a little chart for you if you're wondering exactly how big. So by the time a baby's heart is beating, we're talking sort of between raspberry and plum size. Baby's heart has started to beat. The placenta is a dish-shaped fetal organ, which means it actually belongs to the fetus. It's not the mother's, and it's attached to the uterine wall. And the function of the placenta is to allow maternal and fetal blood vessels to transport materials by diffusion. The mom's blood and the baby's blood never mix. You can see here on the left-hand side is the fetal surface, the side of the placenta that would be facing inwards towards the baby, and the umbilical cord branching off there. The placenta is full of many capillary beds. The fetal portion of the placenta is called the chorion, and those capillary beds are in close contact with capillary beds of the maternal portion of the placenta. You can see here that the mother's blood is delivering oxygen and nutrients, which are being picked up through diffusion by the baby's blood vessels and transported into the baby's body. And then waste is dropped off and picked up again by the maternal circulatory system and carried back to the mother system. The baby's blood and the mother's blood never mix. Now, there are some pictures, actual photographs of placenta and blood. So if that creeps you out a little bit, feel free to fast forward a couple seconds and skip those ones. So this here on the left is a umbilical cord. You can see that it is quite thick and has some nice veins wrapping around it. This is a placenta. Often the placenta is called, or just the structure here is called the tree of life. And you can see lots of those blood vessels. This is the fetal side, the side facing the baby. And those blood vessels would belong to the baby and then travel through the umbilical cord. And then here you can see this sac-like structure. It looks a little bit like a plastic bag. That's the actual amniotic sac. So when a woman says her water has broken, it's actually this bag that is broken and released all that amniotic fluid. And nestled down here, right embedded in the wall of that amniotic sac, is the placenta. There are 4 structures that are found only in the fetal circulatory systems that allow for the fetus to circulate blood through their body without breathing in any air. Those are the foramen ovale, or the oval window, the ductus arteriosus, or arterial duct, the umbilical cord, and the ductus venosus, or venous duct. First up is the foramen ovale, and this is an opening in the septum, the wall between the left and right atria, those upper chambers of the heart. And what the foramen ovale does is it allows blood to bypass the lungs. Since in the fetus the lungs are not functioning, there's no need for blood to travel there. Most of the blood enters the right atrium and is rerouted directly into the left atrium. There is no need to move through the pulmonary circuit. A small amount of blood does to nourish the lungs, but the lungs aren't used for respiration. This oval window closes shortly after birth. The next structure is a ductus arteriosus, and this is found up here where the branches of our pulmonary trunk into our pulmonary arteries branch underneath the curve of the aorta, this aortic arch. There's a shunt there that connects a pulmonary artery and the aorta, and again, that helps to allow blood to bypass the lungs and closes after birth, although a structure does remain there that actually holds those blood vessels close together. And so you can see here the difference, and also you'll notice the difference in the coloration. In the fetal heart, blood is largely mixed. There is no true separation of oxygenated and deoxygenated blood in the baby. Here we have in the atria, the oval window, it's currently open, and then after birth, it will close. Same is true of the ductus arteriosus. It's open in the fetal heart and closed in the newborn heart. You can see that the direction and flow of blood through the heart is mostly the same, with the exception of this pass through here in the oval window and the shunt here in the ductus arteriosus. The umbilical cord forms around 5 weeks gestation and connects the fetus and the placenta. At birth, on average, the umbilical cord is about 2 feet long, and there are 3 spiral blood vessels coated in a sheath. There's a single umbilical vein, which is the largest, and that's transporting nutrients and oxygen-rich blood into the fetus. And so again, here we're seeing a vein that is carrying oxygen-rich blood. When we're describing umbilical vessels, we're talking about whether or not they're going into the baby or away from the baby's heart. So veins are going into the baby and they're carrying oxygen-rich blood. There are 2 umbilical arteries, and that's what spirals around the outside. And those branch off the iliac arteries, so in the groin or legs. And those are to transport waste and carbon dioxide away from the fetus. So arteries are always going away from the heart. In this case, they're going away from the baby's heart, and so they're carrying waste and deoxygenated blood. And so we can see here the connection of our placenta with that one large umbilical vein shown here in red, bringing blood into the baby's heart, and the 2 umbilical arteries wrapped around the outside, carrying blood away from the baby and back out to the maternal circulatory system. These branches on the lower end of the aorta are the iliac arteries, so those branch out into either leg, and that's where we have the umbilical arteries connecting to fetal circulation. And our final fetal structure is ductus venosus, or the venous duct. And this is what connects the umbilical vein to the inferior vena cava. Oxygen-rich blood from the umbilical vein is mixed with low oxygen blood already in the vena cava. Now, the ductus venosus bypasses the liver, and blood travels directly from the placenta into the heart, which means that the baby doesn't have that detoxification stage before blood reaches the heart. And so any toxins present and passed from the maternal circulation through the placenta into fetal circulation can head directly to the heart and the brain of the baby before they reach the liver, because the hepatic portal vein is bypassed. Babies are particularly susceptible to toxins in the blood because this liver is bypassed initially. There's my little Ethan, and some of the changes that occur shortly after birth. This is Ethan, probably around 10 or 15 minutes old, looking like a little old man. With the first breath a baby takes, their lungs will fill with air instead of fluid. While a baby is in the womb, they actually do breathe to practice that movement and those muscles, but instead of breathing in air, they're breathing in the amniotic fluid. And so that first breath that often comes up with a bit of a cough, those lungs fill with air instead of fluid. That increase in oxygen level in the lungs increases the pulmonary blood flow and sends signals to the rest of the circulatory system that it's time to start changing. As the placenta detaches from the wall of the uterus and is delivered, blood flow to the baby stops. The umbilical cord is cut, and the foraminal valley, the ductus arteriosus and ductus venosus all close up and form ligaments. So those are structures that hold the vessels in place, but don't have an actual passageway anymore. In your notes, you've got this diagram. So grab yourself some purple, blue, and red pencils and trace the pathway of blood in the fetus. The next circulatory pathway we're going to talk about is the lymphatic system. Now, the lymphatic system, you should be able to describe the functions of the system, what structures are involved, and also some of the organs associated with the lymphatic system. Now, the lymphatic system is also a transport system, which is why it's included here in circulation. The vessels, though, are circulating lymphatic fluid or lymph and not blood. Lymph fluid contains white blood cells and any excess fluids picked up from the tissues. And scattered around your body are a number of lymph nodes, and those filter the lymph fluid and return any cleaned fluid back into venous circulation. So it helps to maintain blood volume. The functions of the lymphatic system are to drain fluids away from tissue spaces, so any interstitial fluid building up around your cells, the lymphatic system would drain those away. Sometimes we are aware of malfunctions in the lymphatic system because we see swollen ankles, swollen feet, swollen fingers. That's where the lymphatic system is not able to do that job of draining fluids away. We hopefully remember that the intestines, the villi, have lacteals, which are where fatty acids and glycerol are absorbed from the digested material, and that all transports into the lymphatic system. And our lymphatic system also has an immune response. It carries our white blood cells around, as well as many antibodies. And it also has a filtration function. It traps and removes any cellular debris from the breakdown of old or damaged cells. There's some structures of the lymphatic system you'll need to know. Lymph system is very similar to the venous system in our blood circulatory system. The vessels are thin walls and they have valves to prevent backflow. And the cleansed lymph fluids are returned back into the venous circulation. There are also lymphatic capillaries nestled in and around the circulatory blood system capillaries to pick up any excess fluid in the tissues. The lymph nodes are cleansing structures. They filter any lymph fluid of any damaged cells, bacteria, or debris. As well, they produce and store lymphocytes, which are one of the types of white blood cells, and they produce antibodies to fight infection. Often, a person with an infection will experience swollen lymph nodes. So if you've ever had a doctor or a parent feel under your neck or chin for swollen lymph nodes, or if you felt it really difficult to swallow, those are often common lymph nodes that get inflamed and swollen during an infection. We also have them in your armpits and in your groin or some other places you may feel swollen lymph nodes if you're sick. And then, of course, the lacteals, which are part of the villi and microvilli of the small intestine, to absorb the products of the breakdown of lipids. The spleen is an organ associated with the lymphatic system. It produces and stores those white blood cells, the lymphocytes and macrophages. It also has a filtration function where it filters the lymph of damaged cells, bacteria, and debris. And our spleen is also used to store blood. Some other organs and glands associated with the lymphatic system. There's the thymus gland, which is located just underneath the sternum. And that's where T cells, which are a different type of white blood cell, mature and specialize. The tonsils are also involved in fighting off infections. Those are found up and around the pharynx. The appendix, we know, contains lymph tissue and has a role in fighting off infections in the digestive system. And our bone marrow also helps to produce white blood cells. So those are all connected to the lymphatic system. There's a video here at the end of the slideshow for you to watch, and that's the end of the circulatory system. Make sure you go back through your notes, double check you're able to mark off all of those learning outcomes on the weekly plan document. And next up, we're moving to the respiratory system.